Hey folks, Internet Dude here. Hey, today I've got the 2003 F-150 King Ranch in the shop. I had a problem last week. The issue I was having is that the truck was not starting when it got really cold out. Now, it was starting when it was like, say, probably minus 20 Celsius and warmer. It was starting, but when it got colder than that, the truck didn't want to start. And when you turn the key, you just hear a single click. And the clicking noise appeared to be coming from the firewall area. And if we take a look at starting components here, the relay is right here. See if you can see that. So that's the starter relay up here on the firewall. And that's what I was hearing as a single click. Now, there's a number of things you need to check if you're having starting problems. Probably number one is that your battery is charged up and has a good connection. Number two would be like your relay, and then also the starter solenoid on the starter, and just the connections and the wiring. So we're just going to take a look here. Now, I've already done just a visual look at things here. I don't visually see any problems with the relay. The connections look okay on it. If we come over to the battery, you can see there's no corrosion here. I did spray this with some battery protector. Just kind of gives it a red appearance. It looked like kind of a red oil or something that's sprayed on it. So we'll take a closer look anyway over here. So if we look at that connection, like you don't see anything really obviously wrong. And now we'll take a look at the positive, and this is going to look a little different. So you open that up, take the boot off, and we can see visible corrosion around here. And that's not good. So then you come take a look over here and take a closer look, and you can actually see that part of the clamp here going around the bottom is gone. And I knew when I got this truck, I knew one of these was kind of wearing down a bit. I couldn't remember which post it was, like which connector it was, but I've cleaned these a few times. Clearly the negative battery cable terminal is fine, and this one I would say is suspect for my starting problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace this. But I'm going to replace basically the whole cable right from here down to the starter. Let me go show you the starter connections itself. Basically what it is these lines that run back to the relay, then they go down here. Probably can't really show it too well to you, but it goes down there and it goes to the starter. So let's take a look underneath at the starter. So I'm underneath here, and if we take a look, try and get you up here, you can see there's the negative terminal lower on the screen here. And then if we look up there, you'll see the positive terminal. And I can see some green around it, which would indicate corrosion down here as well. And then there's the third terminal there. So I can see green corrosion down here. I can see corrosion up top. The best step here is to replace that cable. All right, so here's the new cable. I got it from Rock Auto. This is not sponsored or anything. I paid for it. So if we take a look, here's the part number. The Motorcraft number is WC95760, and the Ford part number is 2L3Z14300AA. So this is the cable, and let's pull it out here for you. So if we take a look at it, this is a good thing. It actually comes with all of what you need. So we'll take a look at this end. So here's the end that was on the battery. It comes with the new terminal. The other new terminal, and you can see if we get you up close, you can see that's fully intact. Very nice to see. This part runs back to the starter relay on the firewall, and there's an additional ground up there. And then it comes down. This is the part you may or may not have seen down by the frame rail, by the radiator. There's another connection here, another ground. And then it goes around, and there's your 3 connections at the starter. So I think it will be difficult to show the entire thing. So I'm not sure how much I'll show you, but I'll start taking things apart and we'll come back in a bit. Okay, something I just thought of. I took pictures of all these connections before I started, just so that when it comes time to put the new cable on, I'm going to make sure they're all matched up in the right spot. So take pictures. What I've done already here is I've disconnected the battery. Pretty simple. You loosen that nut on there and remove it. And then I had these caps. One time I'd bought a battery and it had these caps, so I saved them. And they're very handy to put back on the terminals like this so that you can't make contact. And especially in a case like this where the wires have memory and they want to put themselves back in place, this is going to ensure that we don't have any problems. So take a look at just how bad the corrosion was on here. If we look at the bottom, like, it's just incredible. I've cleaned this repeatedly. I've taken a screwdriver. I've used different cleaner. I've cleaned that a number of times while I owned the truck because I saw it was bad, but man, oh man, it just keeps getting worse. I don't drive the truck all the time. I just drive it when I need a truck. So and if we look at the other one actually looks pretty good. Now, some guys might be saying, well, internet dude, why don't you just replace that one terminal? Because you can buy replacement terminals, not specific to this truck, but you can buy those like generic ones where you can cut the wire off and clamp it down. But when you see that much corrosion and you look at other areas like we saw down on the starter, corrosion can actually kind of eat its way in the wire back here. So even though you replace the terminal, it doesn't mean you have a necessarily good connection in the wire. So I'm going to keep loosening and taking things apart, and we'll come back. All right, so I have everything loose from up top. I've got it disconnected from the battery. I've got it disconnected from the relay. Just a tip for you guys if you're doing this. Just put those nuts right back on the relay so you don't lose them. The nuts on the relay are 14 millimeter. And then there was a ground wire going back to the firewall at a ground point. And I believe that was 8 millimeter. And then if we follow it down here, I don't know if you can quite make that out, but down there on that bracket, it was a 10 millimeter bolt. And then there's one little plastic clip where this goes up. You can see it right there in the middle, connected into the engine block on the front there. So now I'll go down below and disconnect the starter end. All right, so down here at the starter, I removed the 3 cables that were attached. The 2 larger ones have a 13 millimeter nut. The smaller one has a 10 millimeter nut. And then there's one more clip. You may not be able to see it, but it's just down there that's holding the wire. And what I'm going to do is pull that out, but I realized I probably should remove the starter right now and take it to a shop and get them to test the solenoid and the starter itself. So the next step will be removing this, which I'm not looking forward to, but I think it just has 3 13 millimeter bolts. So I'm going to do that next. And this is way too awkward for me to show you. I know you may be able to reach, or I may have to go through the fender well there. I may have to go through that way. I'll try to get what I can from underneath since I'm already here though. All right, so I got the entire old cable section out. Take a look, and all I did is I just laid it beside the other one just to compare, just to make sure the terminals match up and the lengths match up, and there's a fusible link in there. If we come down here, I've got a clip where it attaches to the engine block. We've got that ground point. This one comes with a new bolt. The bracket, the other clip, and of course the correct 3 ends. So one thing I'm going to put on here before I reattach, but I haven't taken the starter out just yet, I'm going to use this. It's Ford Motorcraft electrical grease. You don't want to use dielectric grease because look up the meaning of the word dielectric. Yeah, so I'm going to take the starter out, and this will probably be a tomorrow job because think the auto parts stores are closed now, but we'll get the starter out and come on back. All right, the starter is out. You're looking at the top of the starter here. The previous view was from that side. There's 3 fasteners. The one with a stud is on the bottom, and there's 2 bolts here and here. I can get at the lower bolt and the side bolt from underneath the truck, but I had to go through the fender well to get that one that's closest to the engine cylinders. Just here at the fender well, and basically I used a socket and a wobble and probably 2 feet worth of extensions, and I had one hand in there making sure the socket didn't slip off the fastener, and the other hand out here on the ratchet, and I got it out. So I thought I'd just take a peek at it. There's not really too much you can say by looking at it. Looks like a starter. I noticed the tag on it. I was curious if it was original, and I thought it would say Ford or Motorcraft on it, but in fact it says Visteon. Well, that's a company that supplies a lot of parts for the Ford factory. If you look at the headlights, for example, they'll say Visteon, and they do other things. I think they were doing audio equipment for Ford back then too. So being a Visteon part, this is most likely the original starter. So I'm going to drop it off at the shop that rebuilds and tests tomorrow. It's not a regular auto parts store. It's actually like a locally owned company that's been here for many, many decades. And I'm going to drop it off and get their opinion tomorrow. All right, so it's next day. As you can tell here, the starter is either rebuilt or not the same one. It actually looks the same. I went down to the shop today. There's a local place in town, and I looked them up. They've been in business for 41 years, and they're that type of shop where they don't have a computer. They smoke right inside the building. You know, real old school place, kind of greasy and just parts everywhere. That's the kind of place where they know what they're doing. So I talked to them about my original starter, and I took it in and they tested it, and they said when they applied power directly to the motor bypassing the solenoid over here, it was totally fine. It was spinning up good. But when they applied power through the solenoid itself here, it wasn't operating correctly, or like wasn't spinning up fast enough. Maybe, I'm not sure. I had left the starter outside overnight, and it got down to, I think, minus 33 Celsius, because I wanted to duplicate as much as possible before I took it into the shop there. So long story short, I had the option to rebuild the old starter with a new solenoid and, you know, disassembly, or just buying one that was already rebuilt. So I went for the option of just buy a rebuilt one. So this one matches up. Looks the same. It's been repainted. I did notice, let me show you on here. Up here you can see the Ford logo, and then let's see if I can get you in on there. Right down there you can see it's stamped 99. So this starter came out of a 1999 or early 2000 model year vehicle. It's been rebuilt. It was basically the same price. Not sure if you care, but it was 95 bucks Canadian plus tax. So I'm going to install this. The bolts that attach to the engine itself, these get tightened down somewhere between 19 pound-feet and 15 pound-feet. So 15 to 19. I actually thought it might have taken a little more torque than that, but that's what it is. And then the ground cable, 16 pound-feet. And then the positive lead cable looks like 88 to 133 pound-inches. So anyway, you don't want to crank down too hard, especially on this the solenoid connection here. The reason you can tighten down more is over on the ground down there is because that's going right into the engine block. So that's fine, right? But this, like, there's some plastic there and stuff, so you don't want to crank down too tight on that. Anyway, so I'll get under there, I'll get this reinstalled. I'm going to hook up these connections hopefully, and we'll come back and I'll show you how it's looking. Oh, and I'd mentioned the electrical grease. I asked the guys there about putting electrical grease right on the terminal, like the connections, and he said, you shouldn't need to worry about that. I suppose in theory you could put it on there. I'm not going to. You could probably even just put a light layer on the outside here just to kind of help prevent corrosion after the fact. I'm not sure, but he's like, you don't need that, and judging by the looks of it, maybe it would have helped on the one terminal, but the main problem was at the positive battery terminal. Oh, I just wanted to mention that the rebuilt starter had been repainted. This is not a natural aluminum finish. So I took just a piece of Scotch-Brite pad here, and I scuffed up the area where the bolt is going to touch on these locations. And then on the back side as well, where it touches the block, I scuffed that down, just so there's no paint interfering with that grounding connection. So if you get a rebuilt starter and it's painted, you may want to just sand those contact surfaces. And he actually, the guy at the starter rebuilding shop, he told me that the other connections that are on the end of the cable, before you put them on, he said sand them down with fine sandpaper to make sure it's like bare copper or like shiny when it goes on there, just to help with that connection. Now I have a brand new cable, so in my case I won't need to sand down the terminal. So I got the starter bolted back up, and I'm just putting the connections on. I was actually able to just kind of attach the top bolt on the starter by feel, by reaching up there and using an extension and having the ratchet in this area up here. So I didn't need to use a whole bunch of extensions and a wobble socket. But what I wanted to show you, I think you can see down there, there's the ground point. It is connected fine, and the smaller red terminal's connected good. But the larger one, I was just tightening it and not really looking that closely, and I can see that, well, I could feel that it wasn't tightening down quite right, like it just felt weird. So I stopped and I took a look at it, and you can see it's a little bit offset here. So what I'm going to have to do is just loosen that up and retighten it down, but just something to be aware of so that doesn't happen to you. Take a closer look than I did while you're tightening, just to make sure it's going on right. All right, so there's the starter, all tightened up, ready to go. Show you the other side. Over there, you can see the protective cap is on there. It's all good to go. I fastened down this wire. There's a push pin, there's a bolt, another push pin. We'll go up top now. All right, so everything down below is tight. All the connections at the starter and the bolts holding the starter on. Coming down here, there is a fastener down there on the frame rail. I cleaned that off, tightened that down. Come back to the firewall. There's two connections here. One's covered up at the moment because there is a cover, so I tightened those down, put them in the right spot. Don't get that flipped. And then there's a ground back there. I cleaned that off. So really all that's left is just to clean up these terminals and reconnect it. If you're doing this job, it's a good time to just double check all your connections, make sure they're in the right spot, make sure they're tight, etc. I just removed this cover that was on the battery. It just slips on when the posts are, when the terminals are removed. And so I'm just going to clean this up, put it back on, and then we'll see what happens. All right, everything is done. Terminals are connected and very, very clean. Lights on. Let's go see if it's going to start. I think it will. Yes, I'm inside the shop. It's okay. Yep. So as you might be able to see there's 246,597 kilometers on the truck. So that's almost 250,000 kilometers. So considering that was the original starter, I'd say it was worth the rebuild and worth replacing that cable that was in really bad shape. All right, so King Ranch is starting fine again. The next step will be to leave it outside in the cold. Tonight it's supposed to get down to around minus 34 Celsius without the wind chill. So that's definitely extreme cold, and that'll be the test for the truck. I'm going to have it plugged in. I'm going to have the block heater plugged in, which is that connector. And the other connector, I'll show you that actually. The other connector just comes up here and it goes to a battery tender junior, and I have it hardwired. So sometimes when I'm not driving the truck very much, I might plug the battery tender junior in, even in like nicer weather. But for now, I'm gonna let it sit overnight. It's gonna be excruciatingly cold, and that'll be the ultimate test. Hope you found the video helpful. If you do have questions about starting or starter problems or battery cables or whatever, leave me a comment below. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. Thanks for watching. It is minus 38 Celsius outside right now. It's morning. Let's go see if the truck will start. I really don't know. It actually got down to minus 40 overnight. Ooh. Turn that off. Exterior says minus 32. That's not right though. Sounds bad, but it started. That's pretty crazy. Minus 32 Celsius outside. Well, some sources say minus 32, some say minus 38. Either way, it's excruciatingly cold. Alright, thanks for watching.